You think of the environment. The environment can be directly responsible for significant mortality. You can think of this as non-infectious disease. If there's no oxygen in the tank, the fish are going to die. If the temperature gets too high, you're not going to need a pathogen in there to cause a mortality event, but it can just be the environment itself that can cause a mortality event. But more often than not, the environment just kind of acts as a stressor, making fish more susceptible to infectious disease. Just like humans, if we're in a stressful situation, we're going to be more susceptible to disease and getting sick. And the same thing, if the environment isn't exactly how the fish want it, they're going to be stressed, and that will lead to disease. It's also important to remember that pathogens are also affected both negatively and positively by the environment. So you may be able to manipulate your environment to decrease, the effects of a pathogen, but more often than not, what happens is the environment is changed to a way that helps the pathogen, and at the same time, it's stressing the fish. And the nice thing about the Tribal Classroom program and your systems is that they're closed systems, and the environmental conditions can easily be monitored and manipulated. So you have control over the environment in your tanks. When we think of a system like a river, like the Susquehanna River or a small stream, it's pretty hard to go in there and manipulate the environment, change the water temperature, and do things like that. But in your situation where you have a tank in a classroom, it can be very easy to manipulate the environment, both good and bad. So, thinking about the environment, we're going to talk about water quality. Water quality usually plays a role in both infectious and non-infectious disease. And the important thing to remember is that there are specific ranges within each water quality parameter that a fish or an organism parasite can survive and thrive. And at the high ends or low ends of these ranges, they can cause chronic stress. So if your pH is a little high, you might not see a lot of mortality, but it is a stressor, and it'll make the fish more susceptible to other things. And it can affect growth rate. And it's not just pH, but any of these factors, parameters. You can think of water quality. It can cause immune system suppression, which increases susceptibility and response to infectious disease. It's also important to remember that any rapid changes in the water quality parameter, pH, temperature, oxygen, can stress and cause mortality. And it's very important to temper your fish or temper your water when you're adding water. And I always thought, when I think about what happens in a stream, as the temperature increases in the environment, the water temperature increases very slowly. It's never, increasing 10 degrees in, a matter of minutes. It's going to increase 10 degrees over a matter of a day as a warm front moves in, or weather changes, the cold front moves in. That water's not going to just change right away. It's going to change slowly. So that's how fish have evolved to deal with these changes, is that they deal with slow changes. But when you get a rapid change, if you're doing rapid water change in your tank and you dump a bunch of cold or warmer water into the tank, it's going to affect those fish. And like I said before, fish should be tempered when changing water. And it's important to remember that water quality is often a major component in the perfect storm that leads to a major mortality event. It's rarely just one thing that causes a major mortality event. Another environmental factor, and this is one that a lot of people don't think of as an environment, but nutrition. And poor nutrition can act as a stressor, making fish more susceptible to other environmental conditions or infectious disease. Some things you want to think about is food size. It's very important to always feed to the smallest fish in the tank. Just because there's a fish that can eat bigger feed doesn't mean you want to switch your food sizes. The smaller fish won't be able to eat that, and they'll end up starving, becoming stressed, or being, possibly be eaten by the larger fish themselves. So When you adjust your feed sizes, make sure that you wait until all the fish in the tank can eat the next size of feed. There are nutritional requirements when it comes to the fish food. The protein, the fat, and fiber, the different concentrations of that. And there's also specific feeding rates that you want to pay attention to. And usually, what we think about is the pounds of fish in the tank and the pounds of fish that you're feeding, or pounds of food that you're feeding the fish. So it's something to keep track of. And when it comes to the actual requirements, the protein, fat, and fiber, that's something that really the Child in the Classroom program doesn't have to worry about, because they're provided. You all are provided with a high quality feed that's already set for rainbow trout. But if you took that same food and tried to feed it to catfish, you might get different results. The biggest thing for Child in the Classroom is your food storage. The feed can become rancid and moldy, and you might not be able to see this with the naked eye, but there's a lot of fish meal, fish oil, things in there that can become rancid, and it'll happen, and it'll affect the fish even if you can't see or smell it. The fish food can go bad. So your food should be stored in a cool, dark, dry conditions. So everybody, that the refrigerator is perfect for that if you store it in a refrigerator, or anywhere that's cool and dark. And you want to keep it closed up in a plastic bag so it's not getting any moisture in there. One of the most important things to do is not to use old feed. You want to start your fish off on new feed each year. We've seen this in our hatchery system, as well as I think some of the Child in the Classroom programs in the past, where you switch your feed out and you have extra feed left over, and people want to save that for next year. Please don't do that. You're better off just throwing that feed out, and we'll provide new feed for the following year. The physical environment, it's also an environmental factor. You think of things as the current, and how the current moves around in your tank. If you're adding things to your tank that might be blocking the current, that might not be the best idea. You want to make, I would say, a fit fish is a healthy fish. So these fish in the wild, they're primarily found in streams. They're constantly swimming. There's current. They're swimming against current. That's just what they've evolved to do. In addition to that, current also helps to disperse food and nutrients and toxins throughout the tank. And you want to make sure that the current's not creating dead spots. It's great to put some things in there, maybe to provide some cover, some structure, but there may be creating a dead spot in there as well, where all the food will pile up behind that structure. So you just want to keep your eye out for that and make sure you're not creating those, because that'll be a spot where things like fungus can multiply, grow, and then possibly affect your fish. As I mentioned before, cover, shade, structure. That's all important as well. I've seen some Child in the Classroom systems where they're completely surrounded for most of the day with the fish are in the dark. Other ones have been in the open, but it's one of the things to think about. How these fish would be, where they'd be in the wild. They're going to be in deeper holes, behind rocks, under trees. Not going to be exposed, out in the open all day long. They might come out there for a little bit, but they always want to go back into shade, things like that. So, creating a more natural-like environment will, help the fish out. In the lack of structure can increase stress. And likewise, putting some structure in there, putting cover, a little bit of shade can help decrease stress. Something to keep in mind is if possible, try to keep the fish away from high traffic areas. If you put the fish right next to the door where the students walk in, every time the students come in and out of the classroom, the fish are going to react to that. Whereas if they're kind of the back of the room in the back corner, and they don't have people moving by as much, it won't be as stressful. This is an educational program, so this is something that the participants will have to balance between. You want the students to see the fish. You want everybody to know you have them, because it is an educational program. But just be aware as you move them out, to where they're more visible and people are walking by them. It can also stress the fish just due to the people walking by them and the traffic. So it's a balancing act between the educational side of things sometimes, and also providing stress-free environment for the fish. Something to think about is mechanical pumps, your filters, your air stones, your lights, your chillers. These usually act as a stressor, but they can cause mortality in some situations. We all know that noise and vibration, act differently in water. So it may not seem like it's a big deal to someone standing outside the tank, but for those fish inside the tank, if you have something vibrating against the tank, it could cause some serious issues and stress. Just putting a rubber mat underneath the tank, a piece of rubber between any kind of motor that's touching the tank can help. So, as I mentioned before, avoid direct contact equipment with the tank. Electricity, goes without saying that electricity and water don't mix. And that can cause major mortality events, but there also can be low current issues where there's just a little bit of current going through the water, and it stresses the fish. You'll notice the fish act differently. They're and so electricity, like I said before, can cause a acute major event, and you can lose all your fish. But it also can just be a chronic thing as well. Another thing to think about is light, the intensity, frequency, duration. Um, you want to avoid turning the lights on suddenly if possible. And this is going back to what happens in the natural environment. In the natural environment, these fish are outside, and there's the dawn and dusk period where it gets light gradually, dark gradually, and so that's what they've evolved for, and that's what they're used to. If you have them in a completely dark room and you come in and you turn the lights on, all of a sudden that's going to stress the fish. There's some solutions you can use, dimmer switches and timers and things like that. But easier solutions, just leave the blinds open so that they get that natural dawn and dusk period. And then there's also your basic impact, your blunt force trauma. If things are rolling around, or if things are being dropped on the fish, or when you're cleaning it, you're squishing them against the side of the tank, that's going to cause issues as well. It's kind of self-explanatory. And the picture on the right here, I think this is either a rubber band or the top of a soda bottle. This was a wild fish that someone had caught, and as you can see, that was dropped in a stream at some point in time, and the fish swam through it, and it's causing problems for that fish now. Another factor you want to keep in mind is population density. It's important to remember that there's three things that fish need. They need water, oxygen, and food to survive. And so fish are competing for oxygen, food, and space. And as they get bigger, there's going to be less and less of that available. And as they get bigger, they're going to need more food, and that food eventually comes out in the form of waste. And so, the more you feed, the more the water quality is going to become bad, and the more you're going to have to do water changes. And then along with that, there's also, as the density increases, as the fish get bigger, there's going to be competition and more physical contact. And every time those fish rub against the side of a tank, or they rub against each other, they're going to scrape off part of their slime coat, and that can cause problems. Leads to abrasions and provides entry for pathogens. And the best way to keep an eye on your population density is to monitor your water quality. If you're constantly having to do water changes and just to keep your water quality at a good level or a good place, you probably have too many fish in that tank. And there's a pretty simple solution to that. Remove fish if there's too many from the tank. Releasing a handful of fish early is a lot better than losing all of them over the weekend, because your nitrate spike, your nitrite spike, or there's too much waste and you get a fungus outbreak or something like that. So you still have fish at the end of the season to release, but we always tell people that if your density seems to be getting too high, just take a handful, take 10 fish out, release those ones early, something like that.